Namaste, everyone.
Okay, I think we can get started, Ji. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome back to the session. In the first part of the session, maybe I'll spend a few minutes going through the slides that we looked at in the previous session. Then we will go into today's class. I hope you can see my screen. So in the first session, we had looked at what Indian knowledge system is and how it sort of traveled across the world. We didn't go into the mechanisms of how it traveled, but we at least know that many of the modern scientific scientific concepts that we use, some of them at least trace their origins to Bharat, like the number system that we use, the concept of zero, decimal system, all these things can be traced. Even the understanding of astronomy, shipbuilding. When many cultures were believing that the earth was flat and they would fall off the earth if they took a ship and navigated, we had trade routes and shipbuilding in place already. So we see that it was a very advanced culture. But then the question also comes in terms of, how did we lose that? If it was so strong, then how did it erode? Can it withstand the test of time in the future? All these questions come to our mind when we talk about ancient, Bharat and ancient knowledge systems. Uh, the crux of the previous session was in terms of the Purushartha and, of course, the Ashtadasha Vidyasthana, or the Chaturdasha, the 14 knowledge systems. The Purushartha, we looked at why we do what we do, whether it is education or whether it is our profession or whether it is our own life. The Shastras say that when it is based on the foundation of Dharma, or Dharma as the Adhar, on top of that, when we have our desires, we have our material pursuits, we have our pleasures and other goals in life, then it becomes a very smooth life aligned with the societal values, personal values, the shastric values. And that also becomes the path for moksha. Many a times people, talk about, like, for example, I had gone to a place where I was speaking, because the context was Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, we were talking about moksha. And then someone said, isn't moksha a bad thing because you are just escaping this reality without actually responsibly acting in this reality? So when we say moksha, it is not some kind of freedom, escapism from whatever we are doing, or just leaving something and then going, or just relinquishing our duties. It is not that kind. In fact, just as we talk about it, say in the Mrityunjaya mantra, right? We talk about Trayambakam Yajamahe, Sugandhim Pushtivartam, and all that. Urvarukam Iha Bandhanat. So we pray to Shiva that the life may leave the body just as naturally a ripened cucumber fruit gets detached from the climber. Okay, it is not a forced detachment; just naturally it falls off, right? So similarly, when we talk about the process of moksha, it is not something which is forced on us, or it is not something that we are giving up. It's not something running away from our duty, but it is rather a process of fulfillment where we feel, okay, I have enjoyed this life, and then now it is time for me to move on to better things, or it is enough of what I had. It's like a retirement. Retirement is not giving up responsibility. You have done your responsibility, and now you feel that you can proceed ahead, right? So some moksha can be looked at as that process where even the fundamental attachments that one has over a period of time gradually just leave the system. So when we talk about Ashtadasha Vidyasthana, we're talking about Veda, Vedanga, Upaveda, and the others. Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharva, Shiksha, Nirukta, Chandas, Vyakarana, Kalpa, Jyotisha, Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, Arthashastra, Gandharva Veda, Purana, Nyaya, Mimamsa, and Dharma Shastra. When you say Indian knowledge systems, largely it encompasses, it comes under this the fold of these things, where there are 4 Vedas, 6 Vedangas, and 4 Upavedas, and the other. So totally it is 18 knowledge systems. People pursue this as deeper branches of study. For example, a Veda Patashala student, he goes through one of the Vedas. Could be a Yajurveda student, could be a Samaveda student, could be a Rigveda student. Goes through the one Veda, memorizes that, then he goes on to studying the Shastras. The Shastras could be Nyaya Shastra, could be Mimamsa, or it could be Vedanta. So they go on to pursue the Shastras where the deeper meanings of the Vedas are uncovered, and then they learn also scholarly methods to do research, to disseminate it in the society, to integrate in their personal lives. So that is to do with Ashtadasa Vidyasthana, and this is what we have been looking at in slightly in detail. Dharma Shastra we looked at. And what we also looked at is in terms of what are the various sources of knowledge. We'll be dealing with a little bit later also. What are the various sources of knowledge? How do we learn things, right? So there are different ways. One, you directly cognize something. Say I have a laptop in front of me. I look at the laptop, I know it's a laptop. So direct cognition is happening, which is pratyaksha. Or we draw inferences, right? So for example, I hear a noise, I make an inference, okay, somebody is parking the car in front of my room or house or whatever it is, right? So I hear the sound and then I'm inferring that particular thing, right? So that is Anumana. Upamana is through comparison or analogy. Suppose I were to, like, for example, some of the children here in the Gurukulam, they were sharing how they have not eaten a kiwi fruit. So I asked the children who've eaten a kiwi fruit to describe that. So they were saying, it looks like this, it looks like that, it tastes like this, it tastes like that. So when we say like, it means that we are comparing what we know, what we do know with what we are trying to explain or what the other person knows. So you would say it probably, in India, we have a fruit called sapota. So this kiwi fruit sort of looks like a sapota. So they would say it looks like a sapota, but it is not sweet, it is sour. Okay. So something like that. So we use comparison to learn about something. So that is called upamana. In Hindi, we say upma, right? Or example. So that's using examples to explain. And Shabda Pramana, or the words of experts. I'm not able to perceive it directly. I'm not able to infer it, nor have I seen it for any comparison. So I have to rely on the words of an expert. So that is called Shabda Pramana or Agama. Okay? And this is what we call sources of knowledge or Pramana or epistemology. Okay? This I will go into a little bit more detail in the later sessions, but at least these are the various. There are few more sources of knowledge which we will look at later, but this is the crux. Each philosophical system has different sources of knowledge. Like modern science, we have, like, experimental, empirical, and all that. We do our own, draw our own inferences, or directly cognize something, or we rely on textbooks and research papers to cite something, and that's how we know. Like E is equal to mc square. None of us have tested it in a lab, right? Or somebody might be like, so having access to test, but at least I have not had the thing to do. Or if I study about DNA, genetics, and all that, I've not seen each of these things under the microscope. My teacher told me, I trust the words, and that is how I built my knowledge on top of that, having that basic shraddha in the words of my teacher, right? So that is how the knowledge is also. So this is what we looked at in the previous session. So now we will move on to today's session. In the meantime, if you have anything to ask or share, just quickly. We can.
I have not been able to access last week's program.
Sorry, ma'am.
I have not been able to get a hold of the first class, and I want to review it.
Yeah, Mridula ji, we will work with you to make sure you have that access. It is all posted on our Google Classroom link through your Gmail account.
Okay.
I will have either Ashwin ji or Darshan ji may be able to work with you offline to get you access to that.
Okay. Dhanyavad.
Yeah. Thank you, ji.
Smriti ji, Namaste Smriti ji, one quick question. I wanted to know more about like Tamagun, Satagun and Rajogun. If I saw that
That will come a little later.
ji.
It will come a little later, but I will just quickly, just 1 minute, I will share. It's called the Triguna, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Sattva is the principle of lightness, pleasantness, and subtleness. Rajas is the principle of energy, dynamism, vibrance, and a little bit of aggression as well. And tamas is in terms of stability, inertia, and lethargy. So this entire prapancha is, and beyond, of course, is governed by the triguna. So whether it is adidhaivika, adibhautika, or adhyatmika, it is governed by the gunas. And this entire reality can be seen as the play of the gunas. So when we say so the Bhagavad Gita chapter 14, 17, and a little bit of 18, they in detail describe the sattva, rajas, and tamas. What is sattvika food? What is rajasika food? That it talks about that. What is sattvika jnana? It talks about that. What is sattvika dhriti? What is sattvika tapasya? What is sattvika karma? All who is the sattvic person? All this is described in the 14th, 17th, and 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And it is also used in terms of the yogic and Ayurvedic aspects. And the Sankhya philosophical system recognizes that this entire reality is constructed through the play of the gunas. And anybody who realizes that this entire creation is nothing but the play of the gunas, I don't need to get so entangled with it, is spoken of as a gunatita, according to the Bhagavad Gita.
Dhanyavad Smriti ji.
DCG?
No, namaste. I have a quick question. Where exactly is the linguistics research embedded within the entire knowledge systems?
So when we look at the Vedangas, it is entirely related to the linguistics. So for example, the structure, the pronunciation, the phonetical aspects of the language in terms of the shiksha, the root words and derivations and etymology in terms of nirukta, and the grammatical aspects in terms of vyakarana, and of course the metrical composition aspects of it in terms of chandas. This is the fully the linguistic approach, and each of them have source text. For example, Nirukta Yaskacharya's works are there. In Vyakarana, you have Panini's grammar. Like that, each one has different source text that a student of linguistic studies.
Smriti ji, there was a similar question on how to place topics like Tantra, Kashmir Shaivism, and so on in this map of Vidyasthanas.
So when we talk about the Tantra and all that, those are practices that come with when we say Tantra, it necessarily means certain processes and procedures that are followed, and for liberation. Okay. When we say mantra, it is basically whatever we use our manas for liberation. Yantra, we use a particular geometrical pattern for liberation or for to do upasana. So Vidyasthanas, it will draw insights from the Vedas, but those have all come through practices, basically. So that is how it is. So when we talk about these knowledge systems, these are more like educational ecosystem based classification of the knowledge systems. the Tantra and all that also come through the Guru Shishya Parampara, but more of practical knowledge in terms of the various processes to be done, mantras to be chanted.
Okay. Thank you, Ji. Dinesh Ji, you had a question?
नमस्ते स्मृति जी.
Yes.
सॉरी, लास्ट टाइम थोड़ा समझने में वो हो गया, इसलिए नहीं अटेंड कर पाया था. आज सिर्फ छोटा सा रिक्वेस्ट, पॉसिबल हिंदी और कुछ नहीं.
Hindi, I think.
नहीं, whatever is, otherwise you will continue in English, but
Yes.
wherever you think.
Sure.
Only.
I mean, I'm familiar with Hindi. I can speak in Hindi, but I think for the benefit of the larger audience gathered here, I would prefer to speak in English. But as you said, where possible, I'll bring a little bit of.
Can I make a quick suggestion, Ji? Can we take a quick vote? How many people cannot understand Hindi? Just
Even if people understand, I won't be comfortable taking the class in Hindi because that is not my natural flow of the language. Yeah, I'm not a native Hindi speaker. Like, I've learned it over the period of years, but when it comes to explaining matters technically, my Matrubhasha or English is what I'll be comfortable with. So, yeah.
Anuji?
So this is about Tantra again. There is
Yes.
a negative connotation for Tantric Vidya and Tantra. So how is it associated with the knowledge system? Like,
So
can you
Tantra,
please elaborate?
Yeah, Tantra, when you see, there is, there are multiple sampradayas of Tantra. The main two sampradayas are Vamachara and Samayachara. So the Vamachara tradition actually brings in a lot of these processes, rituals, and materials embedded with it. And the Samayachara tradition says that you don't need any external materials. The internal, aspects are what are most important to the process of realizing or achieving oneness with the Devata. So in the South, through the acharyas of many Vedantic traditions, in fact, they follow the Samayachara tradition, where there is lot of internal bhavana that is achieved and oneness that is achieved with the Devata. So the first aspect is in terms of, where you look at the picture of the Devata and then you internalize it. The second aspect is in terms of chanting the mantras, where you are able to hear it. But the third aspect is that where the form of the Devata rises in your chitta, that Udaya happens in your chitta itself. So it means you have internalized the Devata. Whereas when you look at Vamachara, it is also called, like, Vama means it's a left hand practice. It's not a leftist approach. It's a left hand in the sense what is not allowed by the society is what is practiced by the Vamachara tradition. So when you go to the northeast, when you go to worship places like West Bengal, Assam, Tripura, and the many Shakti Sthalas in the northeast of India, you would see the Vamachara tradition where the pujaris and the practitioners of Tantra also eat meat, they consume wine, and there are other practices as well, which are strictly guided by the Guru Shishya Parampara. So when we take a book on Tantra in the Western context and read about it, it is all written in a very messed up fashion. That is why going through the authentic tradition becomes very important. So many people are very curious and then they go to the Vamachara path. That has its own, pathway and significance and all that. But largely, people follow the very internal upasana in terms of the Samayachara tradition.
Thank you.
Okay, Smriti Ji, I think we can
continue.
continue.
Yeah, yes. There is so much to talk about beyond this. I know, I understand, but we'll come back to the class. Okay?
Yeah.
So when we look at the Upanishads, it beautifully talks about Satyam Vada, Dharmam Chara, Swadhyayan Ma Pramadaha, Acharyaya Priyam Dhanamahritya, Prajatantum Ma Vyava Chetsihi. Satyanna Pramaditavyam, Dharmanna Pramaditavyam, Kushalanna pramaditavyam, bhutyaina pramaditavyam, and it goes on. So here it says Satyam Vada, speak the truth, do your duty. So this is the Upadesha that the teacher gives, the Acharya gives to the student. The Upanishad talks about it. Once you graduate, this is what you need to follow in your life. So never go away from the path of dharma, and don't be lax, or don't be indifferent towards the self-study of the Vedas. Okay, and stick on to the descendants of your family, and whatever dhanam the Acharya is needing, do offer it to it once you start, of course, earning, and never deviate from the truth, never deviate from dharma, and take care of yourself, and never overlook your own prosperity. And one important thing is that you swadhyaya pravachanabhyam na pramaditavyam. So it means that you have to, one, of course, do the swadhyaya, and pravachana, spread the message of the Vedas, and because it is also to do with certain lineages, also ensure that you pass on the knowledge of the Vedas to the next generation. So this is what the Taittiriya Upanishad talks about in terms of what a student, so such were the high ideals. Because when we talk about educational psychology in the modern context, cognitive psychology, many people have this thing, what has been told about education in our Shastras? It will not, there won't be an education psychology book, or there won't be a pedagogy book, there won't be a Shastra on pedagogy, because the entire life was considered to be a learning process, where the Kula Acharya will be with you, teach you what you would do after graduation, what will you do after, getting married, how to run the family, how to give back to the society. All this is guided by the Acharya of the family, or that is the father also. So that way, such a beautiful message is brought out. There are many things that are there in the educational context with respect to the Upanishads. I'll also share something in the classroom. And what are the qualities of a student that are spoken of? This is a very nice, interesting thing that you can even tell the children. Kakacheshta bhakodhyanam shwana nidra alpahari grihatyagi. Kakacheshta means very active, like a crow. If you see a crow, it will keep on jumping, doing many things, right? And it will be very active. So a student is expected to be active. Bhakodhyanam, one pointed focus, like this crane. So the crane will be looking at the water, and then when it sees a fish, it will immediately catch the fish, right? So it is ever alert, and single pointed focus is there. Shwana Nidra is in terms of light sleeping. Okay, so when you take a dog, even if you make a small noise, it will just immediately wake up. So it is Shwana Nidra. Alpahari means eats in moderation. Grihatyagi should be ready to give up the comforts of the home in order to learn. So these are the 5 lakshanas of a vidyarthi. Kakacheshta, Bhakodhyanam, Shwana Nidra, Alpahari, and Grihat. I don't know whether it is, how far it's visible, because there are many qualities. There are some teacher qualities put together from various Ayurvedic texts, from Charaka Samhita and all that. So here are some of the qualities. So for example, if you see, Sarvendriya Upapanna, of all the senses intact, like well controlled, working well, and all that, right? And Jita Hasta, was the hands should be well practiced, because it's Ayurveda. So very efficient way of working with the hands should be there. Akopana, free from irritability. Teacher should not get irritated. Very important quality. Ahankrita, free from arrogance, free from ahankara. Anasuyaka, should not be always carping and complaining. My vidyarthis are like that, they don't listen to me. My institution is like that. There is no proper facility, no computers for me. A teacher can complain endlessly, right? But free from harping, or free from this kind of a narrow-minded approach to that situation. Okay. Guna Sampanna, possessed of good qualities. Saumya Darshana, should have a nice countenance, should have a nice appearance, so that the children feel very attached. When we say appearance, there is a difference between this, we have this cream, fair and lovely, right? So it is in the earlier times, it used to be dark and handsome, right? So when we say, pleasant appearance, it means that the Bharatiya way of beauty in terms of the proportionate appearance, not just, fair in skin or whatever it is, or some kind of an eyes or whatever it is, but a general proportionate appearance. Upadeshtha, given to guidance, has the ability to guide. Also should have good health, should not often take leave and then be missing from the classes, right? Daksha, possessed of great skill. Like that, there are nice qualities that are described in various texts of Ayurveda. Okay, and there is specific to Ayurveda in terms of skilled in the exposition and interpretation of the sciences of medicine. So these are some of the teacher qualities as described in the Ayurvedic text. So like that, if you see, it's not that it's not codified in our Shastras. It is all there, here and there. So we need one, even that's a good assignment, for all of us, to bring out books that talk about education psychology, pedagogy, developmental models. All this is missing in the Indian context. The presentation of these is missing. So there is a good opportunity to write such books for future generations to consume. Otherwise, people will wonder, where is this all spoken about? Okay. So this is I thought, I was planning to bring it in the previous session itself. I just got time only now to talk about it. So these are some of the things that are spoken of in the Upanishads. So this is a very important graph. I think this was also shown in the presentation in Austin. So this is from the Angus Madison report. Okay. So here, if you see, there are different, this is a chart where you have India, China, and other countries, other regions of the world. And you would see at that some point in time, India used to contribute more than 30% of the world's GDP, and somewhere even close to 25% and more than 20% and all that. So if we had to contribute so much to the world's, again here you have, if you need to contribute so much to the world's GDP, it means that so what does it indicate? A very high GDP contribution. So sorry, don't mind me asking these questions. But anyway, I'm assuming that you'll also be engaging with the other audience, in terms of teaching them some of these concepts and all that. So I'm just asking this question so that you can also follow an approach where you ask questions, bring out insights, and from there you proceed. I'm very sure all of you know what a high GDP indicates, but nevertheless, for the benefit of the class. Please go ahead and mute yourself and answer. Unmute yourself, sir.
It's basically a national output of what a country can offer in globally. That's how we measure GDP.
Yes, what the country can offer globally. What else can we say about a high GDP?
High GDP means, sorry, high GDP means probably the production in the country would be very high.
Excellent, excellent. Very high production.
I think it's the economic GDP or the economic sort of factor also is an indicator of a well-rounded civilization, right? I think we had education in place, health in place, trade in place. Many other fields has to be very much advanced for GDP to show in, as 30% of the world GDP, which is a huge number.
Yes, very good.
I think it's more like a receptiveness of the world for all the goods that we have been producing. And it seems like they were like pretty much exported everywhere. So it's just like China today. Everything is coming from there. So that's what.
Correct. Very good.
Yes. Basically, it is high prosperity, everything together.
Yes. So here, if you see, if we had a very high, like all of your answers are right. I'm just paraphrasing that. So if we've had a very high GDP, means that the productivity products that we produce were of good quality. The world found value in it. There was a lot of trade happening. The overall production capacity was very high. So if we had to have such a high GDP and output of the nation, it means that there were good processes that were set in that were in place in the country in order to produce that goods. And secondly, there was a good skill level in order to produce that output. And if there was that kind of a high skill level, it means that there was a system in place to train people to gain that kind of a skill. It means that the educational ecosystem was there to enable that such kind of skills to be developed. And so you would see that that is what contributed to the very high position of Bharat in the world scenario. And you would see that over a period of time, because of the colonization process, of course, we have had multiple invasions in the past. Mughal invasions we have had, and colonies and colonization in terms of Dutch and Portuguese and the British. We've been continuously colonized by many of these countries, and we have seen a very steady decline in the overall contribution. And now India, of course, is emerging rapidly, but still we are not, yet there how we used to be in those times. Right? It will take a lot more effort from all of us, whatever way possible. So the question is, in terms of if we were doing so well, what happened? Why did this decline happen? If one or two of you could share your insights, because this is a very, very common question that people will ask you when you go out and talk about this. Yes.
I think the colonizers actually took their share and they channeled it in a certain way. I think that's, if you can just see the chart, it actually has a, the Britain actually has a bigger piece on it. Yeah. So do the Europeans, basically. I think you can't really say just the British. Obviously, the Portuguese are number one, and then the French, and the Dutch were also bigly, in a huge way involved. So I guess the European, maybe 5 or 6 nations, they took care of everything. Prior to that, it was the Mughals, so-called Mughals. They were discussed in all of fashions, right? 700s, I think, from 700 to and beyond, and it's still the same way. It's not much different in terms of, maybe numbers show differently, but I think that the dissolution or the cultural, I don't know what word to use in English, but I think the dispersion, it's I think the awareness is coming up right now, I think. So it's turning, it's like a huge ship to turn in the middle of Antarctica, with all the ice around. So that's what I see.
Yeah, very, very, very well said. Anyone else wants
to say, like, poor government policies are not encouraging the people, like, to explore their talents, like, showing outside the world.
Okay. But that, you mean in those times?
So when till the Prime Minister time, like, PV Narasimha Rao time, like, we didn't allowed any of the, like, goods cannot be exported outside of India, or, like, came inside the India, like, so maybe the government policies has changed the things till that time. Yeah, maybe.
Yes. Anything else?
I think it's a combination of both internal and external factors, right? I think from an external factor, invasions, whether that is Islamic invasion or the European invasion, I think the internal factor is also that many thinkers in our history, Vivekananda, Aurobindo, they've written that we departed from our knowledge traditions. So that is one of the primary reasons.
I guess one of the things that comes to my mind is we were connected with with the outside world for quite some time, and then we probably became complacent. And then that Purva Paksha thing, the world was changing rapidly. There were, the Islamic invasion was very brutal, and we were not countering it with that kind of, aggression. Uh, so I think we kind of became complacent. That's what I
Okay.
मुझे लगता है
हाँ.
कि हमारा सांस्कृतिक अधपतन हुआ, उसका कारण ये था कि हमारी संस्कृति पर जब किसी ने अटैक किया, तब उस अटैक को प्रत्युत्तर देने वाला हमारी जो क्षत्रिय संस्था थी, वो मजबूत नहीं थी। इसलिए बाहर से कोई आकर हमें मार के गया, और मारना यानी फिजिकली और नॉलेज और सभी। और ब्रिटिशर्स आए, उन लोगों ने कलम से एक साथ में पूरे गुरुकुल सिस्टम को इनवैलिड कर दिया। तो दैट वाज जो पहले से हमारा देश का अधपतन कैसे क्यों हुआ, तो उसका ये वन ऑफ द रीजन है कि उन लोगों ने अटैक किया क्योंकि उनको मालूम था कि यहाँ खजाना है, और उस खजाने को कैसे ले लेंगे। तो उसकी सोच ये थी कि हम इसके ऊपर अटैक करके लेंगे, और अटैक करने के लिए उन्होंने क्यों किया, क्योंकि हमारी क्षत्रिय संस्था उतनी मजबूत नहीं थी। अगर हमारी क्षत्रिय संस्था मजबूत होती तो उस अटैक का उसको प्रत्युत्तर देते और वहां से भगा देते, और कोई आ ही नहीं पाता था।
As all of you have wonderfully listed out, there are multiple factors. Like, for example, when we talk about the Mahabharata war, what is the reason for the war to occur? There are people often state multiple reasons. It's not just one thing that led to the war. So similarly, it was not one thing that led to the decline. There have been a lot of factors that led to the decline. But some of the things that happened were, in fact, of course, burning of the libraries, in Nalanda, where we lost a lot of manuscripts, and then over a period of time, the knowledge also eroded. Near my place, there were actually in ancient times there were Varma Vaidyas. That's Varma or Marma points, right? So they used to do Marma Vaidyam. Their ancestors' hands were cut off so that they won't practice this anymore. A lot of wealth was looted, even when we needed, the food grains to serve Bharat. They were being exported at that time, which led to a huge famine in Bengal. And in order to prevent the Japanese army from entering, a huge amount of food grains were actually thrown into the water. And people were left without any food. So it's a combination of bad policies, aggression, concerted effort to weaken the system. In fact, if you read the document called Wood's Dispatch, I'll share the document in the Google Classroom. Wood's Dispatch. It's a very detailed document on the British policy towards the Indian education at that point in time. And it talks about how the Britishers should take up the task of preparing servants to serve the British officers, and what steps they need to make in order to sort of change the current education into the education that will serve the British officers. In fact, they wanted to model our higher learning institutions based on what were there in Europe or UK or whatever at that point in time. So there has been a lot of attacks and efforts to weaken this entire system, and that is what we see as is reflected in this particular graph. And there have also been situations when, for example, now if you see in an engineering college, whether you study computer science, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, or whatever, you ultimately get placed in a software company. So say, for example, a computer science graduate earns about, say, 12 lakh rupees per annum. An electrical engineer would probably earn only 8 lakhs per annum. A mechanical engineer would probably earn only 5 lakhs per annum. So there is a disparity that is created there with respect to a computer science graduate taking an IT job versus a mechanical taking an IT job who's not been trained previously, right? So this is what happened when all the kind of jobs that were created were to do with the British offices. Then what happened? There was also a huge sort of inequity that was created in the society, where certain people could manage that easily. Certain people could not manage that easily. And also they ended up, giving up their profession like weaving, pottery, and all the skills, hand-based skills were all given up in order to occupy the offices that were created by the British. And there is also so much in terms of like, I was, in fact, in the previous session when I was there in Austin, I think we had an expert from, I think, Trinidad. Like that, to many countries, people were taken as indentured laborers, right? And then they were put in very harsh conditions, and there was no scope of them coming back also to their own country. Just left there, and then somehow they survived, and then they raised their family there, gone through a lot of hardships, but still held on to what we call the Indian Hindu values, and very difficult situation. So there have been people, in spite of all the difficult situations, who held on to dharma and said, we will preserve it and then ensure that the children get these knowledge systems. So a lot has happened in history there. And some of these things are recorded in it's a very important book. Whenever we talk about Bharatiya education, we cannot not talk about Professor Dharampal's book. So I have added the soft copy of the book, which is there in archive.org. He has written also another book on ancient Indian science and technology, but this book is called The Beautiful Tree. So it is a book written by Professor Dharampal by accessing archives in British Library. So in the 1960s, Professor Dharampal, who was a Gandhian, he wanted to understand what had the British written about the Bharatiya education system. So he went and accessed the archives that the Britishers had about our education system, and he accessed those archival records, reports, and various correspondence of the British officials. And he titled the book as The Beautiful Tree. And why he had chosen The Beautiful Tree? Because Mahatma Gandhi, in one of his talks, had said the British administrators, when they came to India, instead of taking hold of things as they were, began to root them out. They scratched the soil and began to look at the root, and left the root like that, and the beautiful tree perished. So he clearly brings out, so Professor Dharampal took that phrase, beautiful tree, indicated it to the education system of Bharat, and how it perished because of the various things that the Britishers did, the various policies that were brought out. In fact, in some of the British documents, you would find that they would say that we should encourage native language, local language, and all that. But in reality, when they put it into practice, many of the things required English language knowledge. So most of the people ended up learning English. And in fact, if you see, first of all, what they did was, they were a lot of Ayurvedic institutions. Then they brought a regulation saying that Sanskritam should be removed from the Ayurvedic institutions. And then eventually Ayurveda was also removed from the medical system, right? And then this is what happened in a very systematic manner. So the ancient knowledge of our own health sciences was completely routed out. And now we have so much difficulty in actually bringing Ayurveda back into our system, because people say, it is pseudoscience, it doesn't work, there's no data to prove it. What is the proof? How will you scientifically validate? There's so much debate and confusion that is happening in the society. But there has been a history of this. So whenever we have these questions, philosophical questions about ourselves, there is also a historical background about it. If somebody feels, neglected, like, I don't know to speak English here. Many times it happens to young students here. They feel bad if they don't know English. They feel very inferior to others. And what is my role in the society? It's not a philosophical question. It's something that can be answered by history. If you keep valuing English in the society, and then it so happens that obviously there is a pressure for you to learn English, and then the other languages obviously decline. The use of the other languages decline. So that has happened in the past. The book the book by Sai Deepak on India, that is Bharat. There the first few chapters are about decolonization. A lot of it is also about decolonizing the educational process, or what is meant by colonization of the education process. All that is discussed in depth. I would definitely recommend you to read those chapters. Of course, the book is a heavy read, but I'm sure some of you might have already gone through the chapters. But the first part, at least, is to do with colonization, which I found it very useful. So some of the beautiful tree findings are in terms of it emerged from the survey and observation which was made by William Adam. And the education was not just offered in, say, multi-story buildings or AC classrooms, but they were carried out in various forms in patashalas, in community-supported institutions, in the homes of the acharyas, in the under. When I say trees, it doesn't mean on the trees. Of course, it's beneath the trees, and the various gurukulas, right? So not everything was necessarily residential. Whenever we talk about ancient education system, immediately the picture comes of an ashrama with a Vatavriksha in terms of a banyan tree, which underneath the banyan tree there is a acharya or a guru with a dadi sitting like a rishi, and there are a few students, especially boy students, sitting around, and the idea is that they are learning the Vedas. This is the common picture. If I were to ask you to draw the picture of a Gurukula, this is probably what all of us will draw. But if you see, the residential Gurukulas were, of course, of one kind, but they were also non-residential Vidyalayas, where people came in the morning, very early in the morning, and learned until the evening. And they were community supported. Free education was offered. But then also in history, what happened, especially Professor Dharampal traces it, that there was a point in time the Britishers said that we will accredit your institution only when it has a particular infrastructure, like what we have today, right? And once you insist on a particular infrastructure, it means that you need money to create that infrastructure. If you need money to create that infrastructure, the money has to come from the Vidyarthis. So you have to basically collect fees. When you collect fees, the people who have access to money can be part of the education. People who don't have access will not be part of the education process. So automatically, there is an inequality that is created in terms of access to education. So that is how, over a period of time, the British policies actually affected the education system, which was very, very prevalent. It had a large learner base. Women, men were part of education. All communities were part of education. Unlike what we believe, the moment we talk about Indian education, the first thing that people say is, "Oh, women didn't have access to education. They were oppressed. The lower caste were not part of the schools." But you will see in the Professor Dharampal survey, take the time to go through the statistics that is there. You will see that Brahmins formed a very small portion of the Vidyalayams. There were people from so many communities that were part of the education ecosystem. So education in these traditional institutions were actually kept alive by revenue contributions of the community, including simple peasants also. Whatever was possible, they used to contribute, right? And when you compare it with what was there in Britain at that point in time, even there, the British have written, drunkards are teachers over there. At the time, very poor education system, that is mass education system. There were these universities, of course, and there was this elite class that was created which had access to education. But then the large population, it was there, they were completely working in the factories as part of the industrial revolution, and not much mass education was in place. So if you look at the Bharatiya education at that point in time, there were more enrollments, there was better content, there was a superior pedagogy. Even now, if you look at the Gopuram of the Tanjavur big temple, it's an architectural marvel, and there is something for everybody. There is something for a mathematician, for an astronomer, for a Shilpasha, for an architect, for an urban planner. There is something for everybody in that temple, right? So if that structure is standing even today, it means that there has been a very high level of skill and knowledge that was offered, right? So there were larger number of schools and very, very high number of higher education institutions. And there was a huge coverage in terms of the various classes and communities that had access to education. So when you look at the content that was taught in these schools, you would see that the school started very early at 6 a.m., followed by 1 or 2 short intervals for meals and finishing at about sunset or even later. Then Panchatantra. The spellings here are a little weird because these are the spellings that are used in the British records. We have just put it here as it is. Panchatantra, Mahatarangini, and Ramayana, Mahabharata, Nighantus, which are dictionaries, specialized dictionaries for each subject. For example, here at the ashram, we have a dictionary Nighantu for Siddha medicine. So all the terminologies which are there in the Siddha medicine will be present in that dictionary. So as a Vidyarthi of Siddha medicine, the student has to just by heart the dictionary. Like we have Amara Kosha. People end up memorizing the Amara Kosha. The higher learning specialization in astronomy and medical sciences, theology, metaphysics, name it, and it was there. Grammar, logic, astrology, literature, medicine, Vedanta, Mimamsa, all that was there as part of the curriculum at that point in time. And some of the salient features were in terms of the surveys were taken in Madras Presidency in 1822 to 26. The main reason why it was done is the need for understanding what is the school system and inform British policy based on that. There was mention of Gurukulas and Patashalas, and of course, William Adams' report. In his first report, he observed that there were 1 lakh or 100,000 village schools in Bengal and Bihar alone in the 1830s. Now, when you look at the education system in these states, it's in a very bad condition. I shouldn't say this, but nevertheless, it's in a very bad condition where a lot of dropouts are there. People don't continue education. The number of schools are less, can't cater to the number of learners. Facilities are poor and all that, right? And Thomas Munro had observed that every village had a school. And for areas of the newly extended presidency of Bombay around 1820, there is hardly a village, great or small, throughout our territories in which there is not at least one school. Larger villages, right? So every village had a school, and this was true of all the various provinces of Bharat. So such was the widespread educational ecosystem in the country, very rich. So if it had an education ecosystem, it means that there were trained teachers. There was a very high level of IQ that was there in the villages. So when you look at the education system, when you look at the living or how you can say a society was organized, so there were gramas, there were nagaras, and there were vanas. Okay, so the grama is where the production, these were production hubs. Okay, unlike today, when we say today grama, we map it to something remote, no bus facility, no auto facility. And all that, right? But I live in a grama here. You won't be able to easily find the grama on the map. But so much, of course, knowledge is produced in this grama. But nevertheless, today, if you see, there is a lot of road access to where I live here. So you can directly reach in a car or a bus or an auto or whatever. And thanks to the efforts of the current government, more than 6 lakh villages all have broadband connection. So, I have pretty good connections to handle this class, right? So, and next to the ashram, there is a small village which is a weaver's village. So they produce silk saris in that village. So you can imagine every grama had this skill which was a production hub. Even now, if you see, 60% of Bharat's weaving is done in, or not 60%, maybe the largest percentage is done in Assam. Okay. So that is the level of productivity. When we think about Assam, we think about so many negative things, right? Because of what we read in the news and all that. But still, the production of bamboo, the production of woven cloth is so high in Assam, and the unique patterns of weaving are available over there. And that is how the gramas were the production hubs, the nagaras where the sophistication was there, and the consumer hubs. Even now, cities are where you consume a lot. So in order to cater to the consumers, everything is given, right? There's There are highways, there are like whatever facilities, right? You have supermarkets and online and e-commerce and all that for the consumers. Here in a village, probably nobody thinks about why they need an e-commerce site. They just go to the store and buy it, or they just harvest and then consume. Right? And there were vanas, which were the Shri Vana, where in terms of Shri means wealth. So you would harvest wealth from there. So it could be fruits, it could be wood, it is timber and all that, right? There were also very deep forests where the ashramas of rishis were located, where it was considered to be an undisturbed location for deeper research to happen, deeper sadhana to happen, and deeper research to, right? So like that, there were different kinds of vanas that were there, where there were deep vanas. I think they were called Mahavanas or something. I forget the name, which were allocated like the Gurukulas that we read about in Upanishads, where the rishis live, the Rishi Patni lives, and then the Vidyarthis live with them and learn. That happens in forests, right? But right now, what has happened, there is no access to forest. It's all managed by the forest department. You cannot go and set up an ashrama, Gurukula there and say, this is how I'm going to do deep research over there. All the deep research is now only going to happen on DeepSeek, for that matter. Right? Yeah. So the vanas, we are now removed from the vanas, and we are removed from the gramas. We only occupy the nagaras. Right. So here you would see that. So it was a thriving educational system. So here, if you see the Malabar, the collector of Malabar sent details of 1,594 scholars who were receiving education in theology, law, astronomy, metaphysics, and all that. And you would see 26,963 school level scholars, like huge proportion, right? And if you see, the Brahmanas formed only 20% of the total. The spelling here used is the Britishers' spelling, right? The other communities were 54% of the school-going students. There were a lot of girls as well. And so look at in Orissa, you have 63.5% of other caste and Shudras going. So if anybody talks about in education system being only for Brahmanas, only for boys, the others being denied, the statistics are saying something different. You will have to go through a bit of the statistics, and then you have to respond to that appropriately. Students admitted to the schools at the age of 5 on an average, and students attended schools from 5 years to 15 years. And again, their acquirements in various branches of learning are uncommonly great when they attain 13th year of age. Like it started at 6. So a lot of details are given in the beautiful. Is there anything that you want to share at this point in time? Share or ask or anything, any reflection from this? Yes, please.
Hey, if you go back to a few slides, just trying to look at the data, this is about the GDP.
No, GDP.
Yeah, so the numbers don't look that proportionate to me. Like if I just had to quantify, like let's say India is, let's say 50, right? But if I look at the shift, maybe after, let's say 70, 1900, if you look at that era, I don't see a whole lot shifting to Britain. So like I see US actually growing up pretty fast.
Yeah.
So I thought US definitely grew up from World War I, World War II. But Britain's wealth doesn't look like that grew a lot. Like I see like probably like 10, 15 or maybe like 20% growth. So
Yeah,
where did all that money go?
So I think key point to note here, there are a couple of points I wanted to mention about the youngest Madison report. First is that this is not, this is a total GDP. This is not per capita GDP. So, and you are looking at the percentage of, as a percentage of the world. So as a percentage of the world population, today, for example, US accounts for less than 5% of the world's population, but controls directly at least 25% of the world GDP, right? So a similar thing happened there. So when India was, let's say, 30% of world GDP, it was not unfair because India also had a large population. But Britain to even show up on this graph is unfair because they were a tiny portion of the world population, And at the end of the, at their high point, they basically were 2% or something like that of the world population, and were controlling something like 20+% of the global GDP, right? So this graph is kind of misleading, and the source is also to be noted. This is Economist, right? It is highly leftist, anti Dharma magazine. So even they couldn't deny some of the basic facts. So this graph is misleading because it is not normalized in many ways, and also even the Angus Madison report itself is a very unfair, because when people talk about India, or even us, right, unconsciously, when we talk about Bengal, we talk about West Bengal as if that is only Bengal. We kind of inherently right away the other part of Bengal that was taken away, right? In the same way, when people talk about India and so on, they conveniently forget that India of today lost two of the most fertile places on earth, right? The whole of Indus Valley and whole of Brahmaputra, Ganga Delta, right? So there is still a lot of flaws in the Angus Madison report, but despite that, the facts are come out. The true data actually is much more startling. It is much more to India's advantage than whatever Angus Madison report is suggesting. But that is like the, unfortunately, we have to cite the data that is more believed, right? Today, if we go and cite Dharampal's work, most people don't even know. But if you show them this plot from Economist, people are more likely to believe. So that is the kind of background. So you have to normalize the graph to get the true picture.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. In fact, very recently, a very hardcore, leftist researcher and professor from one of the universities has published something very similar to Professor Dharampal's work on the Indian education. I'll also share that article that came out recently. Like people were like, I can't believe my eyes kind of reaction people were giving to that article. People are waking up to the how the Indian education system was at that point in time.
So I guess the message is clear here, like what Anandji was saying. The fact that what we call India is very fluid back then. Bangladesh, obviously Pakistan, Afghanistan, parts of it, and then obviously Sri Lanka and Burma, right? All that, like that's a large landmass, right? So if you put together, it'll be almost like 70% of China if you put it all together. But it also like has to say with the reasons why the GDP was sort of shrinking. It's also the migration patterns within the subcontinent, because I'm a product of migration, because in the 1400s when Ghazni invaded, that's when our community moved from north to south, and we sort of settled in different parts of Tamil Nadu. But that also means like our trade was lost, and the way there's a gap of like maybe a couple of centuries before it actually was able to convert to a GDP number, right? If it was counted, right? It was not counted. Everything was taken out in different means. So it was more internal consumption before a GDP context even existed.
Yeah. So I want to kind of add a little bit of context, because lot of the confusion I think is coming from people taking what we have today and linearly projecting it back in time. So the concept of GDP itself is about 110, 120 years old. It didn't exist till the time of Great Depression came about, right? And even then it was a rough measure, and there are a lot of faults in the methodology. And then you take that number and you try to still project it further back in time. Just projecting it 100 years ago itself is kind of faulty. And then you project it 2000 years, it is going to be even more faulty. So you have to understand the overall point of the data, right? Because it's like getting it, it is better to be approximately right than precisely wrong, right? So I think that is the key point to remember with this graph. The point is that a lot of these economic historians, they try to do the conversion by looking at what the consumption was, what kind of education people had, and so on. And you cannot do a lot of these linear projections. Things didn't work the same way. Even the metric itself is kind of flaky. So the larger point to note here was that India was a very wealthy system that over a period of time shrank, and it shrank very drastically during the European invasion. And the reason it didn't collapse during the Islamic invasion was that the main focus there was direct assault and direct loot. The knowledge system itself was not that directly, messed up. Whereas the British, they basically took away the root itself, right? So that is the difference. And also the British was over a period of time pan-India. The Islamic thing was on and off, right? There is, for example, when the British took over, they didn't take over directly from Mughals as is popularly believed. There was a huge period of time where the Marathas were in control of significant percentage of India. There were Anglo-Maratha War 1, where the Marathas won, Anglo-Maratha War 2, where they lost, and so on. So, you have to kind of look at the big picture of the data instead of going into the details.
And in fact, the lot of raw materials from India was also powering the industrial revolution in a way, and then we had to sort of, even the finished goods were coming back to us kind of. So a lot of things have happened. And in fact, some of the things about the Islamic invasions have been also captured in Sitaram Goyalji's works, where especially in the context of destruction of monuments, a lot has been spoken about in terms of the approach that was followed, the overall motive that was there in terms of why they were destroyed, and many such things, not just for looting alone. And in fact, when we read some of the historical works, you would see that the Somanath temple was invaded so many times, and so much wealth was carried that at one point in time, the mules felt it so heavy, the soldiers couldn't carry it. So some of the bags were just dumped in the water, with all the jewels and gems and all that were just thrown away into the water. So over a period, there is no, as Anandji was sharing, one, of course, this is flaky, but it's also difficult to measure in a way, because now we see that there has been a huge decline. It almost reads like a fantastic fictional novel when we read about the past in terms of how good we were in some of the domains and how prosperous we were.
Okay, Rudra Sen ji.
Yeah, thank you. The other point to note is the Industrial Revolution, the first and second that transitioned the wealth to America. And like Smriti ji said, it's, if you see this book by Shashi Tharoor, they teach us about Industrial Revolution and all the progress, but it's actually, we were actually funding that. The British had no money. It's just a small island. There is no way to have that kind of wealth. Also, it's coming out in newer serials, but there is these things that they talk of blood money or oppressed money when they look at these chateaus and castles built by the lords in Britain. And they're also getting that guilt coming out because it was built on the blood sweat of India, right? The plunder that they did and systematic oppression. So it's sometimes nice to see that they can have that little self-awareness that it's not free. You cannot have any high concentration of wealth without oppression somehow.
Thank you, Jay. Arun Mahodaya, do you want to say something?
I just want to add one thing here. Definitely, I would recommend you to, of course, it's not a fully knowledge-oriented platform, but Pracyam is a fantastic platform that brings out some of these historical narratives in a very, one can say, in a very emotional manner, and in a way that presents it really well in terms of this audio, the videos and infographics and all that. Pracyam, you can definitely subscribe. Many of the videos are very short, but they also bring the history of Indian sciences, what happened during the various invasions. All that has been really brought out then.
I just wanted to also add one more point. It's the greatest irony is that the biggest venture capitalists for the East India Company as well as the Dutch India Company happen to be Gujarati Jain venture capitalists. And that started as early as the 1500s. And in fact, even during the close to revolt of 1857, the financiers continued to be, members of our trading communities who actually gave a lot of the financing for the company to continue its operations.
Rima ji?
Thank you. I would like to add a point to like how India declined basically. So I personally feel like it's impact of Kali Yuga, where people have stopped valuing the overall prosperity, and we are just limiting that into the GDP situation. And even now, when India is trying to grow, I hope like we are thinking to grow in way like the complete prosperity as our older systems had, meaning like we were valuing the truthfulness, we were valuing the respect for others and all that, but we never had, we're not just valuing only how much amount of money per one holds and all. So when now that GDP is growing, it could be still under the impact of Kali Yuga, the mindset that we have, that we are only thinking of like GDP. Maybe if India's leadership, they sort of think of in a wholesome prospect, maybe they should create their own term instead of GDP, that how much GDP we have. They should have their own term to measure the prosperity basically, in terms of the liveliness that we can have in our children, in ourselves, and all that.
Very true. We need much more holistic scales of measuring progress, even our own self. That's why we'll also be looking at the Panchakosha pathway as part of this course for sure. And one thing why some of these statistics and data becomes important, just one quick point here, is that whenever people talk about the Bharatiya education or whatever, immediately we become very self-reflective and defensive and start talking about, oh, we were bad. Yes, we didn't do a good job. Yeah, we could have done better. I know there were a lot of flaws in the Indian society. I know there was this caste system. It was very terrible. Yes, we must have done some atrocity that, we went through it. We deserve this kind. We were not good and all that. So, but then the statistics don't talk about us being those kind of people. That is why we need statistical tools to say that, okay, the problem was not with us. Okay, even if we say some problem was there with us, we shouldn't be worried about that. We should not immediately go into a self-reflective mode. Such data will talk about what was actually created in the society because of these colonizations and invasions.
Very well said.
So what happened because of colonization? There was a focus on elite education, accrediting only those institutions that had a particular infrastructure were accredited, of course. This led to huge disparity or inequality in the education, creating an education system that prepares servants of the European offices as quoted in the Woods Dispatch. And there was a systematic effect of having control over universities. So the idea itself was to standardize the processes so that you will have control over various things. Okay, so full system of control over educational ecosystem. So if you look at the Veda Pathashala system, even now I can say that it is one of the longest surviving educational ecosystems. Been there from the Purana, Itihasa, Vedic times. We had a large number of Veda Pathashalas. Even now we have a large number of Veda Pathashalas. And you would see that there is no one central governing structure that will administer the Veda Pathashalas. The Vedas themselves are the governing authority that way. So people learn under the Guru, they learn the Vedas, they ensure that without corruption, the Vedas are taught to the next generation. People, of course, innovate in terms of infrastructure, how they integrate with the modern world and all that. But largely, it is run as an independent ecosystem. So suppose today, suppose one person learns the Vedas, they can have their own Griha Gurukulam. They can have their few Vidyarthis in their own home, and then they can run the Veda Pathashala. They don't need, when these children have to graduate, get a job or prove themselves, then they will need a certification, which is a very informal way, but there is also a formal structure created here in Bharat in terms of there is a Ujjaini Pariksha that they need to give, or if they skip that part, even that is fine, right? So then there it is not in terms of a full control, one board, setting up one board, defining an education system and saying that, okay, biology, this is the only way I will look at anatomy and physiology. The Ayurvedic, the Siddha perspective will be neglected or removed from the curriculum. This is the only way that students will add two numbers, divide two numbers, find the square root of a number. The Bharatiya Leelavati method is not acceptable. So this happens when you actually set a very standardized content, standardized pedagogy, outcomes and evaluation, right? And the vocational and technical education was largely neglected, which could have led to the industrial development in Bharat. So I think there is a book on the decline of industries in India, a 2-volume book. Again, the reference I will share. This is all a lot for you to read now, but it's just good to have that repository so that in leisure you can read. And the idea was to model the Indian universities on what was existing in London at that point in time. So it was always looked at that perspective. But then there have been Mahatmas who came after that, and then they spoke a lot about holistic education. For example, Swami Vivekananda said, a negative education or any training that is based on negation is worse than death. The child is taken to school and the first thing he learns that his father is a fool, second thing that his grandfather is a lunatic, and the third thing that all his teachers are hypocrites. The fourth that all the sacred books are lies. By the time he is 16, he is a mass of negation, lifeless and boneless. And the result is that 50 years of such education has not produced one original man in the 3 presidencies. Every man of originality that has been produced has been educated elsewhere and not in this country, or they have gone to old universities once more to cleanse themselves of superstitions. So it doesn't sound like Swami Vivekananda lived very long back. It looks like he's talking even today. This seems to be very true. It is ever true until we revive what is called Indian knowledge systems, make it available in the mainstream educational process. The situation is going to be the same. In fact, today, I was just handling a 6 to 7 hour session here for some teachers who are assembled on Indian knowledge system, a bit of astronomy and Ayurveda. And they were sharing how every parent needs to know about this. So I always tell people, once my astronomy class is over, I tell them, see, now you have the bragging rights. You take the simulation software, you brag about it wherever you go. Show people what is a Panchanga, show people what is a horoscope, show people what are the grahas, what is what is the Rashi Chakra, all that you show to people. That will create a lot of fear of missing out in the others, which will enthuse them to learn more about it. So that way, creating that enthusiasm in the society towards IKS becomes very important. So what are some of the main sources of Indian education? If you see, where is all this data there? So manuscript and textual sources, over 30 million survive, several millions are lost to time. Only 10,000 of these have been translated thus far. Architecture and material evidence, Ashokan rock edicts across the country, pottery from Harappan period. Like that, there are many architectural evidences as well. Here also near in Tamil Nadu, we have one archaeological site. Then continuing institutions and their internal historical records. There are a lot of institutions which are very old. They have their own palm scripts and all that. And granthas and texts which survive, often by paying respects to their lineage. That's how you know where this knowledge has come from. So there is one Gurukulam in Gujarat that I had visited. So all the children there are taught calligraphy, and there is one big unit there where palm scripts, not palm, but some other leaf manuscripts are created. So the leaves are prepared and cured over there, and the ink which is there, which is used to write on the script, which will last for at least 600 years, right? On the palm leaves, they develop their own ink, very natural paint. So what they do is they take stones from the various places, and then they different color stones. Only then you can use it for black ink, white ink, and all that, yellow ink, and all that. So they take these stones, and then there is a very elaborate process of grinding that, and then they make ink out of it. And then what they do is they take these palm, whatever raw natural material, they soak it in water, and then they take a small stone like a Shivalinga and keep on rubbing on that, and then they make very smooth leaves out of it on which they can write. And there is a huge group of people, like say for example 10-15 people there, who actually copy very rare books onto these palm leaves, and then there is a process of proofreading and also correcting that. And what they've done is that they've not stopped with the text. On the other side of the the leaves, they've actually painted in Gujarati art the concept that is being spoken of in that particular palm leaf, right? So such beautiful work is happening over there, and it's a Karyashala is there to do this. If you get a chance, if you visit Bharat, this is in Ahmedabad or Karnavati as they call it.
Yeah,
And
it's name Hemchandracharya Gurukul.
Hemchandracharya. And the historical sources on India, the other sources include personal records and biographies, pedagogies in practice. That itself is the proof is in the pudding, kind of. Then temple records and practices, city histories, and historians. There are the Southi tradition was there, and in Magadha they were called Vangirasas. Okay, and chronicles of where they presented chronicles of the royal dynasties. And there are also like a lot of people who maintain lineages. When you go to important temples in the north, there are people who maintain various lineages, and even the homes and family traditions and lineages of learning, that becomes a way of accessing these records. So there will be, for example, when you look at say Leelavati, or when you look at Ganita or astronomy or this, the manuscripts will be there in different locations. Now somebody has to collect that, access that, make it in a machine readable form, and make it translate that, and make it available for the larger audience to consume. It's a very painstaking work. Now there is this National Manuscript Mission in Bharat, which has now digitized many manuscripts. There is also the Tamil Classical Institute, again, which has digitized several Tamil manuscripts related to the Siddhas. And now in the current budget, a huge amount has been allocated mainly for preservation and digitization of the Indian IKS manuscripts. This budget, Nirmala ji has announced that. So again, there are so many artifacts that are there that talk about the rich history and the educational ecosystem of Bharat. So here, if you see Gurukulas and Patashalas, community supported, again, it's just a repetition of what was there in the previous slides. And as I told you, Gramas, Nagaras, Aranyas, right? You see the various Maharishis, ashramas were located. It is in fact said that Durvasa Maharishi had 10,000 students, and he was a walking university. He used to travel from place to place, right? And the site of knowledge production was the Aranya, the Rishikulas, the knowledge communities that were there. And there were Kashi, Mithila, Kanchipuram. All these places were great centers of learning. Varanasi, of course, and many styles of music have survived even now. And what were the different kinds of teachers there? If you see Acharya, Upadhyay, and Guru. And Acharya is one who has full understanding of the Vedas, the meaning, and who's able to impart that. Upadhyay is mainly somebody who imparts the knowledge of the Vedas as a profession, who does it for a living. And Guru is one who takes care of all the samskaras of the student and also provides nourishing environment and food to the Sishya. He is called in some of the texts like Manusmriti, the Guru is also refers to the father, indicates the father. So the father, the Vidya begins from the father. The father imparts the knowledge to the son, and before going to the Gurukulas, or the Griha itself becomes the Gurukula. The father himself can impart the knowledge to the son. The mother can impart the knowledge to the daughter. There is no need to go somewhere and learn, because they themselves will be experts in it. But even now, even if we say the father is a PhD, mother is a PhD, still we don't have the confidence to educate the child at home in the knowledge that we have been trained also. Even when suppose I'm a computer scientist, I don't say let the child learn at home. I'll teach him. I'll make him a computer scientist. Now everything has been outsourced, whether it is healthcare, whether it is agriculture, whether it is education, food, and everything has been outsourced. Now we have in India platforms, 1 minute delivery, half a minute delivery, and 3 seconds delivery, and all that. So you don't really, everything has been outsourced. So you don't have to learn a thing here. Right? So over a period, it erodes. So there were many universities, Takshashila, Nalanda, Vikramashila, and many such things. We will cover some of these in the next class, but I will just show you a map. These are some of the educational locations where the ancient, especially higher education institutions were. I have a few slides that talk about some of these places. I'll cover it in the next class, and then we can discuss there. So with this, I'll stop here. If there are any one or two things to discuss, we can discuss.
I see Rudra Senji has his hands up.
Yes.
Mahodaya.
Yes, I think this is for next time, but I continuously hear about the onslaught and the decline, and it's also very deeply upsetting for all of us. But India is an amazing and strange place. Even when you think everything is dead and gone, there are these ancient schools, people who sustain their own systems to keep these ideas and things flowing. I think it's worth our energy to study how they uphold that. What is the social dynamics and systems they've built so that despite all of that, they didn't die. And knowing that system or mentality or approach, I think that's worth imbibing. I don't know if we can ever cover that, but knowing that sort of approach is a really good tool for us.
Mahodaya, Smriti ji here is a living embodiment of that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, and she can definitely share her experience. And yeah, please go ahead, Smriti ji. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have.
No, I wanted to share the way the knowledge is constructed. In fact, that is one of the reasons the creation, the construction, and the pedagogical approach. I feel these three have worked in terms of maintaining that knowledge. So, for example, when it is in the form of sutras, then it becomes very easy to construct that knowledge, disseminate that in a very precise form. There are lakshanas for a sutra. So there is, in the next class, probably I will share the lakshanas of a sutra. It should be precise. It should be generic enough. At the same time, it should not be ambiguous. Like that, there are lakshanas of a sutra. So when knowledge is transmitted as sutras, then it becomes very effective to store it in memory. So it's a particular form of encoding, and then it also becomes easy to decode that knowledge. And if you see, in many of the, of course, just about a divine aspect of this, not nothing scientific maybe, but when we look at this, when we talk about the Devi Bhagavatam, all that, they say that even after the pralaya happened and the entire world or universe goes away, Devi maintains that seed from which the whole thing, there is a possibility to re-emerge, because Brahma went into deep meditation and he got a command, go ahead and create. And then Brahmaji was wondering, like, where do I create from? Where is this knowledge? I don't see anything around me. Where will I do it? And then he goes and does the upasana of Devi. And then she takes him on a beautiful Vahana, and she shows the entire universe where there is another Brahma, there is a Shiva, there is a Vishnu, and all that. All the universal creations are there. And then he says, oh, okay, now I know what to create. And then he again starts to create. So that way, the seed is also maintained by the Guru Parampara and Devata. So it goes much beyond the physical body that way. Even in terms of, if you have to talk about the transcendental aspects of it.
I put a comment there.
Yes, very true. Yeah.
I'm actually annoyed with that. This is all the rishis. Nobody takes credit. No intellectual property. They just
Yeah.
give it up.
Somebody has pointed to the lakshanas of the sutra. Very good. Alpaksharam, asandigdham, saravat, vishwatomukham, astobham.
Anavadyam cha.
Anavad.
Smriti, one question. So you brought up one point, like, where both the parents are PhDs, but we will not educate our kids, right? So what is the problem? Like, why we will not do that? Like, is it something you are not capable of, like, teaching our kids, or like, is it something like, our parenthood, like, they will not listen to us, even why we outsource the things?
Because we don't consider that to be our primary dharma, ji. When we look at the Veda Patashala system or whatever, or even the other vocations, say a weaver was there. His primary dharma will be weaving, and his child will learn weaving from him. He will not send him to a school to learn English. Of course, over a period, that's what happened. But I'm talking about, say, the core essence of it. So he considered his primary dharma not to go to office, but be there and teach that knowledge to his child and other children, probably, if you want a community school or whatever it is. So that way, if we feel that our dharma is to teach our child being at home, we can do that still, right? But somehow we don't do that. Again, the way knowledge is constructed, the way the profession is constructed, what is a measure of success, what is a measure of outcome of knowledge, all that has transformed and what you can say, more gone through a lot of change over a period of time.
Can I add to Smritiji's point in a layman's people term? Like for me, I see this personally in our life, like that again, like Smritiji said, like what do we hold value? Like where do we want to put effort to? What do we see as success has changed in our life? So in olden times, like when women used to be at home, they were taking care of home, everybody's prosperity. But right now our focus is, okay, our women are also working, our only focus is money. We don't think what else we need in our life, like in terms of children's education, their prosperity. The respect for women at home has gone way down, substantially down. We don't respect in that sense, and then we just only value like whether she's earning or not. And I think that's another major part to why we are not able to impart the knowledge, and even the knowledge as well. Like we don't hold value, like even I have gone through situations in my life where I've seen like even the simple knowledge as maintaining the nitya niyams and all that were lost. And then uh, all of these things happen, and then we are not being responsible. We are not understanding that what is important in life, and what is the goal of life as well, like to attain God. And to we only right now person like think only for themselves, or what is there for me, what do I get out of it, and all that. And that's the reason like we are all being little selfish. The society, when I'm saying we, means society is being like selfish, and that's when we are not able to think of giving. We are not able to think of giving knowledge to the kids and making them a better generation. We are not able to think wholesomely. So as a woman, like there is a saying like it's very easy to attain moksha for women, because if we give up our own interest to serve our family, that's itself is one part of moksha, right? Like but now everybody is only thinking of, oh, I'm the feminism. Right? So
Yes, just to add one perspective here. Of course, in one generation there was a feeling that women being at home, did not work well for the society in terms of them being discriminated against, or whatever happened in history in the past. But then there should also be ways by which we can course correct now that we reflect on, okay, if women need to perform a role where the family needs to be, the values of the family needs to be upkept or whatever. It's not just the women, anybody in the family who can stay and sort of contribute to that effort, that has to be course corrected now. If we are still with the mindset where, like, all of us in the family have to earn in order to maintain the family and run it and all that, then it becomes again an approach which is probably one generation old or whatever it is. So I think at different points in time, we reflect as a society, course correct, bring out certain aspect. Like now there is a huge IKS revival. We have self-reflected and said, okay, we need this for our society. So like that, I think at different points in time, we reflect and course.
Yeah, and one point to Rimaji said that we are not doing, and also sometimes what happens if one in the family, if one person has that inclination, other person has some different type in different direction inclination. So सबसे पहले तो ये दो तो एक हो कि भी क्या करना है, तब जाके आगे हो सकता है. अगर स्मृति जी के हस्बैंड उनको सपोर्ट नहीं करते तो स्मृति जी इधर बैठ ही नहीं सकती. तो ऐसे ही सभी, सबसे पहला तो वहां से ही एक स्टार्ट हो सकता है.
जी वही, like our preference as a family, our values of family, I think वही change हो चुका है. That's why we have only money oriented mindset right now. That's the sole reason.
I have a separate question. My question is around understanding that the teachings that we are getting from the IKS, how can we evaluate ourselves? Is the homework that is being given is the good way to measure our success, or do we have another avenues to explore as well? For example, in the last class, we discussed about several topics, Chand and various parts of Vedas and Upanishad. Sometimes I wonder how deep I need to go at this time, and what is the right way for me to measure myself in terms of whether I'm at the right understanding level versus do I need to put more efforts? I don't have that criteria to measure.
So initially, it will be the the basic level in terms of the mapping. So some of the ways by which you can enhance your learning is to probably develop one's own concept map of things. As you learn, drawing some mind maps or concept maps might help. And then, for example, some of the knowledge systems now have become very difficult to access also. Like, for example, say Nirukta, like very few people research on that. And then most people don't use that also. Vyakarna, again, it's a very steep learning path in terms of you have to dedicate yourself to Sanskritam. So each one has its own learning pathway and requirement of time that is there. But the overall idea of this particular course is that first we learn the names and the overall meaning and import of those terminologies, and what are the various sources to access more about that, at least that part if we know, and how do we sort of bring it and then teach it to beginners. If you have to talk about Indian knowledge systems, what are different ways to say talk to a high schooler, talk to a primary school, or to your own child, or to your own friend or colleague. So that will also be the approach. In fact, the last session of this module will be precisely working on how do we present these knowledge systems to different kinds of audiences. So to that extent, I think is what is expected at the moment. But yeah, it will be a long journey, of course. Multi-year project.
Got one follow-up here. Sorry, I'm not interested looking to take the entire time. Like as you said, there are several topics for which we don't have much knowledge about research and whatnot. For example, Niyukta, and also there would be even in the Vedas as well. So where do you think we need to draw a line where just the metadata we need to understand, which helps us understand, okay, this is a topic that explores around this area, versus
areas where we want to go and deep dive further. For example, Ayurveda is one aspect which I feel has more knowledge in our day-to-day life, and there is a lot of research as well, and then we can zoom in further. So
Yes.
can we get some understanding, like which are the areas that are more meaningful to apply now and also as part of the IKS curriculum, so that we can do some pre-reading as well? It will give us an understanding of what we don't know that we can try to clarify in the class.
Correct. So as part of this course itself, you will be going through, Ayurveda, astronomy, mathematics, and yoga in much more detail. So that will be the focus. The other things will be just some kind of a nama rupa mapping, the name and what is that kind of some subdivisions and divisions, and some source text names or the related rishis. So that what happens is that any book that you pick up will keep talking about this. That will build some language and verbal familiarity. That verbal intelligence of IKS will be built over a period of time. But the domains that I mentioned, we will be going into depth.
Okay, thank you, Ji.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think we can wrap up the class. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you, everyone. We will post all the materials associated with this class in a day or so, including the recording. Please engage. We have a lot of material that we generated, including quizzes for the first class. So please do take a look at those and try to solve that. It'll help you review the slide deck as well. The beautiful tree book the link has been posted. So please take a look at that as well. That will be the, that was the main content today, and a lot of discussions around that. So, we'll prepare materials for this class as well. And yeah, let's keep the study going. All right. Thank you.
Just one question. Everything will be PDF, right?
Sorry, Ji?
All the material that will be shared, that will be in the PDF format, right?
It's mostly PDFs, yes.
Yeah. No, because somewhere I thought I saw some docx. I couldn't open.
That's okay. You don't. Yeah, the classroom site can open the docx in its own format. So yeah, you don't need a Microsoft Word
Word
installed. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ji. Yeah. Dhanyawad.
Thank you.
धन्यवाद.
धन्यवाद.
Namaste, Mridula ji.